Welcome to today's Explainer, folks. I'm going to be your local historian today, and we're jumping right into our time machine to explore one of the absolute most fascinating urban evolutions in all of American history. We're going to trace exactly how a rough, frontier agrarian settlement in Alabama evolved into a massive textile hub and then ultimately transformed into the global aerospace giant we now know as Rocket City. Let's dive in. Here's our roadmap for the journey. We'll start with the early agrarian settlement, move on to the textile mill boom, look at the strikes and economic decline of the 1930s, check out the massive World War II intervention, and finally, the birth of Rocket City. All right, starting things off with Section 1, the early agrarian settlement, laying the roots in Madison County. So we're rewinding all the way back to 1805. This is when John Hunt established a frontier settlement that was built pretty much entirely on plantation agriculture. But by 1819, things started to shift. The locals tapped into the free-flowing water of the Flint River to power the state's very first textile mill, called the Bell Factory. And honestly, that single development was literally the first brick in Huntsville's entire industrial foundation. Now, way before we were building rockets, King Cotton was completely running the show. Madison County was an absolute agricultural powerhouse. I mean, farmers were consistently harvesting a staggering 1,000 pounds of cotton per acre every single year. So it wasn't just a crop, it was the total economic and cultural lifeblood of the community before the factory system really took over. Which brings us nicely to Section 2, the textile mill boom, becoming Cotton Mill City. Moving into the late 19th century, there was this highly focused, really intense campaign to completely transition the region from just a farming community into a major manufacturing hub. Local leaders basically rolled out the red carpet to draw deep-pocketed northern investors. They offered inexpensive labor, lax southern labor laws, and municipal tax exemptions. And it worked. Those northern investors brought serious capital and brand new manufacturing technology down south. But here's the thing. It wasn't just about building factories. It was about building entire communities. Mill owners built these sprawling mill villages for their workers. So daily life for a mill family revolved entirely around the company. You bought your groceries at the company store. You worshipped at the local church they helped fund. It created these super tight-knit social bonds, but it also built a very strict, dependent social hierarchy. To really sweeten the deal for all that northern money, city leadership invented this incredibly clever concept called tax islands. Basically, they granted unincorporated parcels of land to industrial complexes, like the massive Dallas Mill, which allowed them to operate just outside the official town limits so they could pay lower taxes. This influx of outside capital was the engine that stabilized the local economy and really transformed Huntsville from a farming settlement into a bona fide industrial city. But, as you might guess, this massive boom came with a pretty huge vulnerability. Imagine living in a town where 78% of the county's entire agricultural income came from one single crop, cotton. The local economy was incredibly lopsided, and as history loves to remind us, banking your entire existence on just one industry is a very, very risky game. And that perfectly sets up Section 3, strikes and economic decline, the end of the cotton monopoly. The Great Depression hits, and man, it hits the area hard. By 1934, massive industry restructuring led right into the general textile strikes. Workers were fed up with conditions and low wages, so they just walked off the job. Overnight, the social fabric of those tight-knit mill villages we just talked about was torn completely apart. We're talking blacklists, permanent factory closures, and a severe regional depression that basically brought Huntsville's textile dominance to a grinding halt. This quote really hits the nail on the head regarding the sheer panic of that era. For decades, those textile mills acted as the sole engine preventing Huntsville from becoming a no-industry ghost town. So with the mills shutting down, the city was once again staring right down the barrel of total economic collapse. But fate, disguised as an impending global conflict, actually had other plans. That takes us to Section 4, World War II intervention, the arrival of national defense. Okay, look at this newspaper extra from July 1941. This is the exact moment the city's DNA changed forever. The federal government stepped in and announced a massive $41 million chemical warfare plant. When this news broke, sirens wailed, papers were tossed into the streets, and practically overnight, that terrifying threat of becoming a ghost town just vanished. To meet these insane wartime demands, the military pulled off a massive, highly structured pivot. They recruited thousands of local farmers and housewives, literally people with zero prior industrial experience, and trained them from scratch to produce munitions and chemical defense materials. And get this, they didn't just meet their quotas. These newly minted, highly skilled workers were so efficient that they actually surpassed national production schedules. So this rapid industrialization leaves us with a totally fascinating question right before our final section. Because believe it or not, even after the war, Huntsville briefly went back to marketing itself as the watercress capital of the world. So how exactly did we jump from producing mustard gas and farming watercress to literally building spaceships? Let's find out in Section 5, Becoming Rocket City, the high-tech metropolis. Enter 1950. Werner von Braun and his team of 800 German rocket specialists arrive in town, forever changing the city's identity. And you really have to notice the stark contrast in the labor landscape here. The daily work routines of the old mill hands were mostly semi-skilled physical labor with really low cyclical wages. But this new aerospace boom, it brought in a flood of highly educated white-collar engineers from all over the globe. We're talking federal benefits, the highest per capita income in the state, and folks who had absolutely zero ties to the old cotton culture. It was a complete societal rewrite. The sheer scale of this demographic shift is honestly staggering. The population exploded by 340% in just a single decade. This massive influx forced the incredibly rapid construction of sprawling suburban neighborhoods. The city's footprint grew from just about 4 square miles to 50, and today it sits at around 220 square miles. The old mills had definitely acted as early engines for population growth, but it was the aerospace industry that permanently put Huntsville on the global map. And what's incredibly poetic about this whole transformation is that the very same retrofitted textile factories, like the old Lincoln Mill, were actually used by contractors like Chrysler and Boeing to help build the Saturn V rockets that would literally take us to the moon. King Space had well and truly dethroned King Cotton. As we close the history book on Huntsville's incredible transformation in today's Explainer, it leaves us with a pretty powerful question to ponder. Take a look at your own city. Will the industries dominating your town today adapt to tomorrow's innovations, or will they become ghosts of the past? Thank you so much for learning with me today, and make sure you keep exploring the history right in your own backyard.